Good morning, everyone. It is time for a niche conversation. And today we are going to be talking about empty lots. Empty lots in urban spaces and rethinking them, how we can use them to deal with some urban issues. But I'm going to invite Carmen in, who is our There we go.
Hello. It all worked out like you said it would.
I know what I'm talking about. Welcome to NiCHE Conversations.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm Jessica DeWitt, one of the editors here at the Network in Canadian History and Environment. And today I am joined by Carmen Gilmore. Can you tell us about yourself?
Well, I am a Saskatoon-based writer, and I call myself an independent scholar. I'm interested in land-based research, and I'm really curious about how we understand the land and the stories it tells, and how those both inform our storytelling and how the land shapes us.
Wonderful. Well, I am really glad to have you as a first-time NiCHE contributor, and today we are going to be talking about your piece that you published recently, From Vacant to Vital, Rethinking the Role of Empty Lots in North American Cities. And this piece was largely a reflection on Christopher Brown's A Natural History of Empty Lots. So I thought we could start off by, can you tell us a bit about this book?
Yeah. So I stumbled across Chris's book online, and the title just intrigued me. A Natural History of Empty Lots, Field Notes of Urban Edgelands, Back Alleys, and Other Wild Places. Like it resonated with what I'm interested in and what I'm writing about. And yet, as I dove into the book, I really saw that Chris's writing was so different, right? Most nature writing really focuses on like escaping to this pristine wilderness, and you have this experience that nobody else can really have, right? Like you have to be there at dusk when the owls come out. And Chris, he turns that on his head, and he invites city dwellers to look around and notice the rewilding that's happening around them, the pockets of nature in the empty lots or the back alleys or wild spaces. I loved how he took his reader along his journey, which seems extreme, right? He bought a vacant lot in the industrial part of Austin, Texas. There's a big petroleum pipe coming out of the land, and he has it removed. The land is, deemed safe, and he builds a home for his family. So I think for most of us, that's, I'd rather go to Banff than engage in all of that.
Yes.
But as I was reading his book, I'm a mom in Saskatoon suburbs, so many of the things he was writing about resonated with me. They were the same experiences I was having. I'm exploring the urban edgelands with my kids. I'm canoeing the river in the city, and I'm seeing the urban land in a new way. And even noticing the movement of wildlife through his yard. We see that all the time in our neighborhood. So Saskatoon and Austin, Texas seem really far apart. But I had to wonder, I think that, that's a pretty common experience if you're living in a suburb anywhere, right? You're seeing that the urban edgelands are coming up against the farmland. We might put up a fence, but the animals don't respect that. They just see it as a thoroughfare. Yeah. And so I think the last thing I really loved about his book was that he asked these philosophical questions about who belongs in the city. And it's not just about us humans, it's about the wildlife. And if we can't all escape to a remote cabin in the woods, he asked us, like, how are we going to live with the wild in our cities?
Yes. Yeah. I love this topic. I haven't read the book yet, but it's now on my to read, obviously. But yeah, I've made because I also live in Saskatoon for our audience, and I've made a point to do a lot of urban exploration, particularly before I had a kid. Before I had a kid, I did a mission where I walked to every single park on the west side.
Oh, wow.
So, and that involved a lot of alleyways and a lot of I enjoyed seeing the parks, but one of my favorite things along the way was to look at these empty lots and to kind of there's remnants of people who had lived there at some point. There's so much horseradish and rhubarb in these empty lots. It's just fascinating.
tell a story, right, of
Yes,
who was there.
exactly. Yeah.
And you know, I think of an old homestead near where we are by the river where, you know, there's irises that are planted there. And I know on the
Yes.
prairies, lots of times you'll see, like, you'll know where the farmhouse was because of the caragana, sometimes the hollyhocks or the irises that some farm wife planted, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so we've touched upon this, but your post does connect the book to our city of Saskatoon quite a bit. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about how a natural history of empty lots resonates in relation to issues that Saskatoon is facing.
I think it connects in lots of ways. And I do want to say that I don't think it's just Saskatoon. When I reflected on this, I really thought it was prairie cities and probably a lot of North American cities where those suburbs are creeping out into what was farmland. One connection I really saw was like how we describe and value land. You know, when I was growing up in a small town, an empty lot, you know, was probably of highest value to us kids. It was an additional play space. But in cities, you know, those empty lots are worth tens of thousands of dollars. So in a city, when you see an empty lot, there's usually a reason why, and it's usually not a good reason, right? There's some kind of contamination that's there. I think that's especially true in downtown areas. So those were the sites where there was gas stations or dry cleaners, or there was some industrial use. And developers probably see the cost of remediation as too high. So I pointed out in my article that the city of Saskatoon does have a brownfield reclamation guide, and it does highlight one homeowner who has reclaimed a brownfield site and built a house just like Chris Brown did. I think that that's a lot for most of us who just want a safe spot for our families. But on the other side of that, I see that, you know, Saskatoon's public library, it's being built on a former brownfield site. So the cost of that remediation was borne by the seller. And that brownfield site is going to become a new public green space. So I think as our cities grow and we face the high cost of that urban sprawl, and our city councilors are saying, no, we need to densify, we need more housing. We're going to have some awkward conversations about how we value that land, what we're willing to put into remediating land, and how we can really change that narrative. They don't need to stay empty. Though some of them will. And I think that as you remarked with exploring with your family, that there's still great value in those sites, right? Even if they're not of human value, they might be preserving some biodiversity. They might be providing shade for a species that couldn't survive otherwise.
Yes, always thinking of our more than human neighbors as well.
Yeah.
And your piece, like you touched upon, like we have an unhoused crisis in our city, which is other cities in Canada share, particularly in Western Canada. I guess Toronto as well. All cities, it's a capitalist nightmare.
Yes.
But you know, it was making me think. You know, I do a lot of work with Showing Up for Racial Justice Saskatoon, and we help David Finday, who does smudge on an empty lot. So Station 20 rents an empty lot from, I think, Esso. It might be a different gas station, but they own the lot in case they want to build a gas station there at some point.
Interesting.
And then they rent it out to Station 20, and then David has smudge ceremonies there for unhoused and other marginalized folks in the urban core. And it's just another example. But at the same time, that's great that they can do this once a week, but, you know, why aren't we using these empty lots to help and, you know, set up some tent cities, some permanent small, you know, structures, small houses, tiny houses for front of house folks. So anyways, there's so much potential. That is just a lot of sitting empty.
Right. You see, that vacant space has no value, and yet I think that there is a lot of value there. I think that was a great example you shared about a gas station and what our former gas station site and what it could become. Right. If we have the vision. When I was thinking about this as well, I was thinking about, Chris talks about like bringing his new baby girl home to this feral home he's created, a feral house he's created right in this industrial site. And he notes the coyotes outside the fence line, and he notes the people who sometimes breach his fence. And when I saw that map from the Saskatoon Fire Department, I was very grateful that they allowed us to share it. I was really shocked by the number of encampments across Saskatoon. It didn't make me think that's how I see my city. It was very shocking.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, as a historian before this, I kind of went back and I was looking and I found a photograph. It didn't turn out very well, but it was from 1931. And it was showing a shack along the river, just built of crates. You can see the snow along the edge. So it's like early spring, just the same season we're in. And so I think that although the scale has changed, the problems may be bigger. I think that Saskatoonians are really struggling to accept that unhoused people have been here the whole time there's been a Saskatoon, right? It doesn't reflect how we want to see ourselves, but I guess the good thing would be we have the opportunity to engage in social justice and how we want the future to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, and this topic just also just really connects our relationship to the natural world with these social justice issues. Yeah, so to wrap up today, you know, like, how would thinking about empty lots, urban lots differently in Western Canada or a broader North American context change our relationship to our natural surroundings, or you know, improve them, what have you?
Yeah. I thought about this in a couple different ways because it immediately took me back to my own writing, you know, where I've been as a few years thinking as a suburban mom, how do I connect to the land if I don't even know the story or the history that's here, right? And as I slowly learned the history about the former chemical dump that's just, you know, steps away from my street, you know, I struggled because not knowing was a lot easier. Not seeing homeless encampments is a lot easier than seeing them and saying, okay, now you have to deal with it in some way. But over time, I think I realized that, you know, that chemical dump is just one story of the land, right? And today that land is rewilded. It's a habitat. It's not pristine, but it's doing a lot of good in the world, right? It's a wildlife corridor. There's plants that are there as a repository of wild seeds. And I think that, like Chris, because of where I choose to live now, I've become an environmental advocate. And I think as a parent, the two often go hand in hand, maybe a little more when you're faced with contamination. But then just like in the article, I kind of like built out from that where, you know, I referenced Jesse Salas's Calgary Ring Road project where, you know, he's providing the alternate view than the city of Calgary to that ring road expansion. Or Ken Wilson, where he talks about walking the Regina bypass and how all these places that we call non-places because we don't know the story slowly became spaces that he would return to as he learned the history, as he learned what the stories were, right? Which sounds like a lot like what you were doing as you were walking down these back alleys and going, someone planted rhubarb here and there was a story here, right? Yeah. And I would just close by saying that, you know, the proposed national urban parks, I think, are exciting and frightening in some ways. I mean, Saskatoon, Edmonton, Winnipeg, there's a lot of other cities in Canada that are looking at them. I think there's 12 of us. But I think they will really change our understanding of our natural surroundings. Because until now, you know, those national parks, it's like going to Banff or Jasper and you're looking at this beautiful view. And in those national parks, there are contaminated sites. Like I know, you know, Canmore, just outside of Banff, like, you know, there's coal mines, right? Like it's not a pretty history. It's part of our environmental history though. And I think the national urban parks, these pristine habitats just don't exist, right? We live in a city, it's degraded, but that doesn't mean there's not value there. And I think that those empty lots or back alleys really challenge us to start the conversation now about what will those natural spaces in a national urban park look like. And I really hope that as people then start to say that the wildlife is all around us, that they will become more invested in caring for it.
Switching our
view because it's here. So how are we going to live with it? It's right here. We get to enjoy it. So,
It's making me think of William Cronin has this famous essay that all environmental historians have to read. It's called The Trouble with Wilderness. And he's talking about how, you know, this idea of wilderness really keeps us from seeing what's right in front of us,
Yes.
whether we're living in the city or we're living on a farm or what have you. And I think this just further highlights that issue. And I think that, yeah, it's just really important for us to appreciate what's close to us, and I think part of working towards a better future is really focusing on community building, and part of community building is taking care of the space that's right next to you, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
The more than human people, not more than human beings, I should say, that are right there, right? So anyways,
when you talked about
really
the smudging at the gas station,
Yeah.
it just made me immediately think about, you know, if you designate land as protected, do you in a way kind of sanctify it? And so then it goes from being contaminated or, you know, maybe derelict to saying, well, now I'm invested in restoring this because I have, through my actions, made it whole again.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. A lot to think about. Great topic. Thank you for joining me today, Carmen. It was great to talk to you and meet you virtually face to face.
Thanks so much, Jessica. It was great to talk.
Take care.
Okay. Bye for